will be taking a look at the King's Indian attack, which is an amazing opening with white, starting with the move e4, and this opening is especially good at destroying the French defense, which we will take a look at first, and also the Sicilian. So we are going to start off with the French defense. So we play e4, e6, and then we play this move d3. And the reason why we play d3 is because we know in the French black will play this move d5, and we want to be able to put the knight here and support this pawn, so that if this trade happens, you can always recapture. Because if your knight was not here, you would be losing your queen. For example, if you played something like knight here, you would get a position like this. And that is not what we want to get. So that is why you play this knight here to d2 to protect. And this variation, I will first take a look at what to do if white just pushes c5 and goes for this queenside attack. If they capture you, you have a whole different variation, which I will cover in a moment. So first we will take a look at what to do if they play this move c5 and then go for this queenside attack. And my goal is always to just teach you the general ideas, because of course black can always make different opening moves. But if you understand the plans for white, you will be able to figure out what to do during the game, even against stranger moves. And if you come across moves I don't show you in the video, that's usually because they are a little bit worse for black, and you will have even more chances. So here we are going to play knight to f3. For example, knight to f6, doesn't matter, it could also be like knight here or bishop here, it all leads to the same position. Then we will play g3, for example, knight c6, bishop g2, bishop e7, and castles. And this specific line, the idea for white is to launch a kingside attack, and there are multiple ways to do so. So what we want to do is play this rook to e1, because you have to remember in these lines you want to push this pawn to e5. Because if you can push this pawn, you can chase away this knight. This knight is an important defender on the king side, and that will also help us gaining some space and chasing away a defender. Of course, during these positions, black can always capture. I will continue mainly with what to do when they don't capture and they allow you to play e5, which is something that happens a lot. But sometimes they will capture you, and if they capture you, you can just take back with the pawn. They might play e5 if they want to, of course, because otherwise you would still be able to do this and get many of these similar positions. So let's say they play e5 themselves, then you can always go for something like knight here, attacking this. They will have to defend it. You can always develop your bishop. If they are smart, they will try to do something about his knight, but you can always go for a trade like this and then go back with the knight. And just something simple like this is what you need to remember if they trade on e4 in the middle of your setup. Because of course this is still fine, you can get something like this, develop the queen, but this position is perfectly fine. It's about equal for both sides, so you won't have any problems here. But most players will go for a queenside attack, for example with b5, a5, and then we have some pretty spicy lines for white. So we're going to push e5 because we want to kick away this knight, so the knight goes back. And here is an important thing you need to know if you want to get good at this opening, and that is to remember this pattern with moving your knight back, which is something you can do in many lines, and you do this to free up space for your bishop. And then after your bishop develops, you will be able to put the knight on this e3 square, where it will be a little bit more centralized and active than it was on this d2 square. So black continues with the attack, and here it is important to play this move h4, because if you were to just develop your bishop here to protect this pawn and then make space for your knight, you could always run into g5, which is a little bit annoying. So if you play h4 first, you gain some space on the king side, which is good for your attack because we can use this pawn later, and also we are stopping this g5 push. Black will continue with the attack, and this attack really is the only good plan for black in this position, but it's also pretty slow, so we have a lot of time for the setup with white. So bishop here, mainly because you just want to develop it, so you can put the knight here, but it's also useful to have it defending this pawn, so that we can free up this knight in the future, and also the bishop is really close by even to sacrifice itself in the king side if necessary. Black continues, then you can play something like a3 to stop his attack. You can also always continue with your own attack, but if black really expanded this far, I always recommend playing a move like a3 and you will get something like this. And basically the entire black attack is already gone at this point. So for example, a move like bishop a6 is the most played, and then we have this move knight to e3. And of course we are already at move 15, and now we are starting to get into some of the really tactical and spicy lines. it's definitely possible if you play this that you will get different variations, that black makes a mistake, for example. And a common mistake is something like queen c7. That's just what I want to show you, because in those lines there's always knight takes d5, and if they recapture you get this push and also a discovered attack on the enemy queen. So the queen has to go back, and then you can take this knight. And that is an important pattern to remember, because often your opponent will put a queen here or here. It's also important to realize that this does not work against the rook here, and I have seen many players do this. Actually, in this position, the most played move by white is this knight sacrifice, which is terrible, of course, because you are giving away a knight, you are giving away a pawn, and you are giving away a bishop, all to win a rook. So you are giving 7 points of material for a rook, and that is just not what you want to do. But it's useful to keep this in mind if they mess up and play the queen here. Of course, they can also put the bishop here, which is more passive, or they can move the rook. Doesn't really matter. Everything leads to pretty much the same idea. So here, let's say they now play the rook. So the idea with white that I have here is something pretty awesome, and that is to play this move c4. c4, and now basically black has nothing, and we will be able to start an amazing attack. Because you can see, we are the ones in the center with these pawns. We have a really strong center. We have all these active pieces near the king side. The queen will also be able to join in. And black doesn't really have anything except a little bit of pressure on the queen side, but it's also slow and it won't do anything. So that's why we play c4. Black will probably capture, and then you can play knight takes. If black pushes, you actually have this move knight g4, and this position is already pretty amazing for white, because we will soon have a devastating attack here on the enemy king side. For example, maybe a rook move like rook here is something that is played a lot, and then you can already start off with your attack. But I will show you the attack after they capture here, because the idea is pretty similar. So we are going to capture with the knight, and then for example we will get this trade, which is possible. And in many lines, black will try to go for this weak pawn, and you can just let them go for it, because they will waste a lot of time, and at the same time you will be setting up the attack. We are going to play something like queen c2, and in all of these lines you just have to keep in mind that you want to use as many pieces as you can on the enemy king side. So it's not really important to know these exact lines or these exact variations, but just know that you want to always play more pieces towards the enemy king side, because that is where you will be able to get a winning advantage. Here something like knight in is something you will see a lot of the time. You can always exchange, and then your bishop opens up, that's also fine. And then here, this is just one example, or I will say 2 examples probably, of how you can destroy the enemy king side. Even if you have traded some pieces and you don't have a lot of material left, you can still destroy the enemy king. And this is a main example. So we are threatening here to win this h7 pawn. So there are actually, let's say, 2 decent ways for black to stop this. One is, for example, g6, and then one is this move h6. And we are going to take a look at this g6 move first. So the pretty crazy idea you have here is to play your bishop to h6, attacking the enemy rook. And as you can see, where is this rook going to go? It only has 1 square. And after it moves, you have bishop c6, attacking the rook again, and the rook doesn't have any squares left. So what can black do? There's actually only one move in this position for black, and that is to move the knight back. And this is already losing. Of course, because something like queen takes, and there is so much pressure here on this diagonal, that this knight is also under attack, and if black doesn't do anything, for example, if black just makes a random move, he will lose this knight. And there's not a single way to protect this knight. So black will have to move the knight again. Maybe something like knight c5, because that is the most active approach. But then you can just move back the queen. You still have this threat. So yeah, they can't move the rook. The only thing to do is move the knight back. And then, for example, you can capture here. And again, you have the same threat on the knight. And there's pretty much nothing that black can do. The only thing they can do is just move the knight and then accept that they are going to lose material in many lines. For example, this specific variation, you would actually play a move like queen g4, because then you still have this attack on the enemy rook. And again, there's not much they can do. If they want to go back again, you can just pin it and win it as well. So pretty amazing lines. And it's just important, if you like to play this opening, to always be on the lookout for tactics. Now I will also show you what to do if they play h6. You can do something like queen here just with the idea you want to get your queen closer to the enemy king, and it's not really doing anything anymore on this diagonal. So for example, queen here, let's say they go for this pawn because now it's attacked twice and they can try to win this. You have something like queen g4, and this is already dead lost for black, even though the material is still equal, because there's pretty much nothing black can do. If they go and take the free pawn, you have bishop takes h6, because of course this is pinned. And then this is already winning, and if they go for something like g6, of course you are taking this rook. But you can also, instead of taking the rook, take here first and do a double bishop sacrifice. And if they capture you, that's it. That is a check and a mate. And yeah, there's not much else they can do. They can, for example, go back here, but you can always move this bishop again, and this will also lead to a checkmate. For example, something like this, and it's already hard to defend. The best defense by black is actually something like sacrificing this rook. And there's even a move like bishop f8 check, king here. Yeah, just insane variations. This actually leads to a checkmate in 17 if you are curious. So there is a checkmate in this variation. Of course, they can also play something like king h8 if they want to be safe and try to stop your sacrifice. And then you sometimes even have sneaky moves like moving the bishop back, acting like you are defending this pawn, but now they will take it because they think, wow, we have two attackers. And then again, bishop h6, sacrificing this bishop, and then queen e4 and threatening this easy checkmate, and there's nothing black can do to save this position. The best approach is something like f5, and then we capture this, and then maybe rook here, but of course, as you can see, we are already winning material, for example, in this variation. So if you want to play this, you don't need to know any specific lines. The main idea is to just go for this entire kingside attack, put all of your pieces towards the enemy king, and then sacrifice, if necessary, to get a winning advantage. So you need to be a good tactical player to play this opening. Then you could also say what to do if they capture this early on. Well, we are just going to take back, and here these lines are even more amazing, I would say, for white. You have something like this, the regular setup, and then you don't play this g3 move, because here there's actually something better by playing bishop to d3. Almost all players will castle in this position, and then you have an amazing attack. It starts immediately here with e5, pushing away this knight, going in with your knight, because of course we want to get all of our pieces towards the enemy king. And this position, even though we are only at move 8, and this is a really common position, white is already winning in every variation. So for example, bishop goes back, bishop g5, attacking the queen, and this is really annoying. If they play something like f6, which is the most played move to try and stop this, because of course they can also move, but that's also terrible because here white will do a long castle and then just a devastating kingside attack. So let's say f6, captures, they take with the knight. Here you can play something like queen e2, you castle on the queen side, and white is just so quick with this attack. You can see we already have 5 pieces near the enemy king, and we will be able to push this pawn and activate this rook, and there are almost no defenders on the king side. A move like queen e8, knight takes, knight goes in, and the idea is just to always move forward, always get closer, always activate more pieces. A move like c6, and then of course you can always play h4, h5 here, or even earlier you could have played it. And then if they try to do a counter attack on the queen side, they will be way too slow. You will get something like h6. If they try to stop you with a move like g6, you have a bishop sacrifice on g6. Again, pushing the pawn with check. They might take with the knight, and then you have this rook sacrifice. So this is an amazing variation to take a look at and use these ideas in your game. Rook sacrifice, and then just a quiet move, queen g4, and the idea is to activate the queen, activate the rook, and this will lead to a checkmate. So for example, they can take the free pawn, check, you play rook here, you are now threatening checkmate in 1. And actually the only thing to do here for black, if you don't want to be checkmated, is just go crazy and give away a lot of material, because this square is already cut off and the queen will just come in with checkmate here or here. So the only thing a black can do is something crazy, like sacrificing a lot of material, and then they can make a escaping square for their king. But of course, they just gave away a bunch of material. And then even in lines like this, it doesn't really matter the specific variation, but in many of these lines you will end up with a checkmate. So if they capture on e4 immediately, you just have to remember this idea that you will play your bishop to d3 instead of this g3 move, and then you can just castle queenside and just do a devastating kingside attack. This also works well against the Sicilian, especially if you can transpose from the Sicilian into this French defense setup. So for example, e4, c5, knight develops, knight out, then you can always play a move like d3, and if they play this e6 variation of the Sicilian, you will be able to transpose into what we have seen before. So for example, g3, d5, knight here, knight there, bishop here, and I won't even need to explain this because this is the exact same position that we have just seen. So if you know how to destroy the French, you will also be able to destroy the Sicilian if they go for this setup. Then of course there are also different variations of the Sicilian. For example, here in this specific variation I went with g3 first, but of course you can always go for d3 first if you think they will go for this line, or if you know they will go for this line. If they play something like d6, well, it doesn't matter anymore and you can play this a little bit later. You can still have the same approach from white, and against this type of Sicilian you will usually have them do a kingside fianchetto with the bishop. So kingside fianchetto, something like this. And then here, this is actually something I came up with just for this video, and that is this move rook b1. I was just looking of how can I give them a way of playing an amazing attack even against this type of Sicilian. Because your regular plans that I just showed you in the first part of the video, they don't work against this. Because black just has too much grip over these squares and you won't be able to do this push. But here I found this amazing move rook b1, which is an interesting concept. And you can use this against this Sicilian. You can also use this against the modern defense and also against the Pierce defense. So if they play one of those openings, you have this idea. And the idea is that we are going to launch a queenside attack now, because it's not possible to do a kingside attack here. I've tried it with this move, but it doesn't really work. The best thing you can do here is to go for a queenside attack. So you will get something like this. Now we play this small move a3, and our plan is to push b4 in the future. So for example, queen there, b4, and you will get a position like this. Of course, there are many different variations. If you really want to take a look at this, the Lichess study for this opening is in the Discord server. They can play something like b5, c3. They can go for an attack here. And these are just the most played moves that I am showing you in these variations. You can take, and then here you will have this amazing central position. You will also be able to develop your bishop, and then also you have active knights. So maybe something like this, they will go back with the rook and then bishop here. And that's just the main idea to remember. There's no like killing blow kingside checkmate attack here, but it's really nice to know this idea with this rook b1, a3, b4, and you will always have a pleasant position with white in these lines. As you can see here, it is actually white who has the more centralized position, the more active pieces, also a nice bishop, a file for the rook. So it is really white here who has the better chances. Well, you could also tell me what to do if they play e5, what can I do then? Well, I also cooked up a variation for this, knight f3, and then here I go for this immediate g3. You can always play, of course, d3 when they attack your pawn. Something like bishop here. And it is important, some players will go for an early attack here, so it's always important to make sure you can castle quickly and don't really waste any time in the opening. Because for example, if you play something like this, sometimes you can be a little bit too slow if you are too passive. So for example, a variation like this could be a little bit annoying for white. Of course, this doesn't work because, well, they can take with the knight or they can take with the bishop. So that's why I like to be fast, castle quickly, and then you are fine. And you can always play this knight here later because there's no immediate pressure. Most players who play e5 will of course go for this d5 counter push. You can just capture that, doesn't matter, and then play your knight here. I think it's better to capture this yourself instead of playing knight here. You can also play knight here, but I think it's a little bit more passive for white. So I like to capture this and then play my knight out. Something like rook here is the most played move. We always have rook e1, and this is a common concept in many of these variations with white. Bishop g4 is something you will see so often. if you see this, always play h3 and then g4. They can also play this bishop g4 earlier and some variations, but always just remember to kick it away immediately with h3 and then go for g4. Position like this, just develop your knight, and that's why I like to take here myself and then develop my knight here to this beautiful square. Attacking the bishop drops back. And then again here, something like a3, because of course you don't really want to go crazy and destroy your king side here, so maybe a small move like a3, stopping these knights from coming in. Bishop d2, and here against e5 we will also play for this queen side attack, like I just showed you against the Sicilian. But you're going to do it in a slightly different way. For example, you can play these pawns, this bishop, also c3 helps, and then you can push b4. So for example, c3, their only counterplay really is this f5 move, and it's important to know you can capture this with white. This is okay. Like, you might think this is crazy because your king is here under a lot of pressure, but you just have moves like king h2. And I wanted to show you this just so you know that you are safe. This is protected, and in some variations you can even move back the knight if it is really necessary. And then here we have this b4 push in the queen side. Captures, captures, and again, these are the same concepts against those Sicilian variations, where we have a lot of space on the queen side. We can do some pushes, we can develop the queen, we can grab some space, we have this rook here. For example, a variation that I just wanted to show you is what to do if they take, because I think this is what you will get the most. If black is a decent player, they will realize that white has so much pressure. And if black is just a little bit too passive, for example, a move like this is a little bit too passive, you will have such a great attacking chances here on the queen side and also in the center. So if they want to counter you, the best option they have is just exchanging almost everything. Taking this, then going for this exchange, queen exchange, rook exchange, bishop exchange. And this is basically the only way for black to try and fight for equality. But even here, there are some spicy lines, and that is with rook d7. You are giving away this free pawn, and this is actually a trap. You're gonna play this move knight to g5. And that is an interesting concept, because I think if you are playing against decent players who play e5, you might get this position. And here it's nice to know this little trick to give away this e4 pawn, and then bam, we play knight g4, knight g5, and we have this attack here on the rook, and we are aiming at this square, and you will see some nice tactics here. There is a way for black to defend this and go into a bad endgame, but most players will probably try and be safe and, for example, play the rook back, and here we have this amazing move, bishop d5 check. Of course, if the enemy king goes here, this is a checkmate, so that's not so good. Black wants to go to the corner, and then we have knight check. Then we have knight here check. Of course, you can also go to h6, but h6 will probably just repeat, so that's not really too useful. I like to go to this d6 check, and then here you can win the rook. So that is a really nice variation to know if you drop this pawn and then go for these tactics. Black can try to defend this with a move like rook e5, but I still don't like this for black, because there is still this check. And then, of course, if the king goes here, we are winning the rook. So the only option is to go there, and then you can take this pawn for free. So black has to give away this pawn, and then again, the king has to go here. You are going to trade and then capture this as well. And if you just look at this, I mean, you don't really want to have this position with black in the endgame. So that is only if they have perfect play and they try to exchange everything. If you like this opening that I showed you, you might want to play it against everything. So I showed you how to play it against the French with the two variations, against the Sicilian also the two variations, one that goes back to the French, one that's just Sicilian. You can also use that approach to the Pierce defense and the modern defense. You might also get, of course, the Scandinavian, and I have to say there's nothing special against the Scandinavian. You can just take, play your knight out. If they go there or here, it doesn't really matter, because honestly I think the Scandinavian is quite easy to play for white. I love it with black, but I think white also has an easy time. You just have to remember this d4, knight out, bishop out, and there are actually some spicy lines and some tricks you can set up with white. If you want to see this, you should check out my video on this as well. This is the Scandinavian Valencian variation. Then if you play against the Caro-Kann, which is also something you might come across, I like to go for this early d3, and then if they play d5, again you play your knight here with the same idea that if they capture, you want to be able to capture with the pawn without getting into this queen trade. Then for example e5, and then just our same setup, we're gonna play this. And I like to wait with developing this knight, because if you develop the knight too early, all Caro players will of course throw their bishop out, and I like to just wait a little bit and then play it. And if they then go for it, just castle and play h3. And if they trade, you might get a position like this. You can take back with the queen. Knight e7. We have knight c4, some pressure here in the center, and if they try to kick you out, you just basically go to c4 to go to e3. Just like in the other variation, you went to f1 to go to e3. It's just the same idea, but we are taking a different route with the knight. If they capture, you can take back with the bishop, and this is already just a good example of a starting position. So against the Caro-Kann, if you play these first set of moves that I showed you, with this d3, e4, and then the knight of course going in, and then you can go for this kingside fianchetto, just make sure to kind of wait before you play out your knight. And I think this is a position you might get, or something similar if they play slightly different moves of course. But this is always going to be nice because you can activate the rooks, you have some pressure here, you have a really safe king. So nothing special, nothing to worry about. And now you should be able to play the King's Indian attack against everything black tries. If you like this video, definitely subscribe, leave a comment, leave a like. I read all comments, and you can also join my Discord group. That's the first link in the video description. That's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!